Welcome to Code Creative. I'm Travis Tolson, and with me, as always, is Sarah Tolson.
I don't get to introduce myself anymore.
I mean, you can go for it.
No, you've already stolen my thunder. I've got nothing now.
All right. So
now I can hear you. So tonight we're gonna do cool things. I'm excited.
Tonight we're gonna do cool things.
Not an integration. Not.
We're gonna do service portal things tonight.
Yes.
I decided to do some fun stuff.
It's my favorite things.
So you get to criticize my design.
Mm-hmm. And then I'll change it afterwards. Be like, no, we're doing it this way.
Mm-hmm.
So by cool service portal things, what exactly do you mean? Are we going to continue our work in the Recaptcha stream of things?
Yep. So basically we're going to pick up where we left off on our public unauthenticated feedback form. And
camera is like doing this little jiggle thing where it won't focus on me.
Yeah, yours was acting up tonight. It's weird.
All right, so here's our form.
So here's the form where we left off last time. And ideally, what I want to be able to do is make it so that we can create, any form we want using a drag and drop interface. So, hi, Jace, how's it going? So the goal here is to, instead of having a static form that you're kind of stuck with, and instead of creating some highly customized system of tables that imitate Service Catalog, instead, what I want to do is create a collection of independent widgets that you can use the Service Portal Designer to drag and drop. Hello, dog. My dog.
Did the dog get out?
Yeah, he's okay. He can hang out.
Okay. If I need to go get him, let me know. This is live coding. This is our version of. Can I tell him what I was telling you about what we should really call this?
Sure.
I said we should really be calling this cozy coding happy hour because we don't do drinking. We're always like milk and cookies and snacks and lemonade and stuff and so I think we should be cozy coding happy hour. I'm not a very I mean, I can't tell you I'm not cozy. I got my Pokemon back there, but yes.
My drawing board.
CJ likes it. But anyway, you were saying, so we are in the we got interrupted by this and dog and my ADHD. So we are in the Service Portal Page Designer, which is the drag and drop thingermadoodle that we all know and love and use to set up our pages and our widgets and our rows and columns and all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so
why are we here?
Well, so what I want to do is, like I was saying, create a system of widgets, like a separate input field, a separate drop-down field. And so basically it would enable you to drag and drop the inputs that you wanted onto your service portal page. And so you could create multiple forms. Each service portal page would be its own form. That way you could create multiple, and it would all piggyback on the same system that we've already built, CAPTCHA's whole 9 yards.
This will make it a lot easier if you have multiple clients or even within your own organization, multiple public points of entry on your service portal to ensure that everything is standardized and everything like that. And also drag and drop just sounds cool.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that I wanted to make something that would make it easy to build these forms. Because again, the whole idea is that We want a system that provides a base level of security for your public unauthenticated forms so that you don't have to mess with that code. That code is safe and it gives you a sandbox where you can put the stuff that you want. And so this is kind of the running idea that I've got, is to separate these out into separate widgets. Now,
This
to
means they'll
that
have to
end,
talk to each other, right?
mhm,
But they don't like
yes,
talking to each other.
and they don't. And my other computer is acting up right now, so give me just a second to get things.
It's okay. We got through the last time on this whole restream situation. I figure, we'll get through the first one. I need to set up so
Okay.
I have a whiteboard so I can draw my doodles.
All right, so I'm going to drop sharing that one for now, and I'm going to do some sketches.
So Jay's comments about last time, and yes, to give a little bit of a recap, we've been talking about public forms on Service Portal and how to do that safely. Yes, to mitigate spam submissions, to also make sure that that your instance was as safe as possible, not only from being the victim of a denial of service attack, but also set up for success when those attacks happen so you can more quickly get your instance back on its feet.
Exactly. So I'm just kind of sketching out a couple of different inputs here. So, you've got your text input up in the top left corner there, a drop down up in the top right, and then you've got your radio button down there, and then you'll have your CAPTCHA. So we've got, different types of inputs, but ultimately, we need we need these widgets to be able to communicate. I can't just have standalone input fields, standalone drop down fields, standalone radio buttons. They have to be able to talk to each other. Basically, when I click on a submit button, my process is going to have to be able to get all of that information from all those fields and submit it to the REST endpoint that we have set up previously. Now, if each of these are separate, isolated widgets, then we need a way for these widgets to talk to each other. And one way of doing that, and the way that most people are most familiar with, is using Angular events. Root scope broadcast, root scope on, $scope on, scope emit. That's the way I see most people handle inter-widget communication. Now, the problem with that is that if I turn around and broadcast some event from this guy, all of the others that need it have to listen to that event, and each one has to maintain their own separate state. So, basically, you end up in a situation where everybody has to know everybody else's business, and it can get kind of messy. So, it can also become difficult to track which widgets are talking to each other, which ones aren't. So, I mean, events are really good for really loosely coupled widgets. But as soon as you start getting to the point where you want your widgets to be more tightly coupled to each other, like they share state or they share logic, the events method doesn't really start working out anymore. That it starts to break down. It becomes more confusing, more convoluted, and harder to follow.
More a
Um,
pain to keep maintained properly too, it sounds like.
yeah, I mean, the thing is that if you take over, hello, Crash. I don't remember everybody's names outside their handles, except for Jace because he made it easy. but but essentially, oh, Kevin, hey, how's it going, Kevin? Um, But yeah, to your point, Sarah, it becomes harder to maintain as well, because if you're a new developer on a project and you're looking at a widget and you find some kind of root scope on or scope on or root scope broadcast, it you have the event name, you might have a payload, but like the information is limited. Like where do I go to find out what broadcasted this event? Or if I'm broadcasting event, where do I go to find the ones that are listening to that broadcast? And the reality is that you can search for it, you can do a search for the event name, and that can help you find the widgets, but it's there's no centralized logic, so it's hard to tell what the actual behavior is. Like I've seen instances where people where somebody has hooked into an event to fire another event, and then somebody else hooked into that event to fire the original event. Like the people who took over the different widgets were not aware of how the events were supposed to be fired, and they actually created a circular loop of events because there was no documentation on how the events were supposed to work. And so people interpreted what the event was supposed to do and ended up creating circular logic. So events can get really messy. What I really want is a centralized state container. And in newer systems, in newer UI frameworks like the Next Experience framework, this is built in. Like the centralized state is core to how the application is built, or core to how the framework is built. And you pretty much have to use it. I mean, the centralized state and passing centralized state down through your components is how the new system works. The same is true of things like React. I mean, React is a little bit different, but most people that develop React use Redux or some other centralized state container. So modern UI frameworks, it's very commonplace to use centralized state. In the AngularJS days, it was not nearly as popular, but AngularJS still offered us a tool to accomplish this. And in ServiceNow, it's called Angular Providers. And in AngularJS, it's called services, and you may also be familiar with directives. So basically, a service is essentially a function where we can centralize state. So basically, I can pass information from a component to the service, and other components can get data from the service. And so basically, this enables a way for our different widgets to talk to one another by creating a set of functions by which they communicate. So all of that is fairly abstract. So let's actually start digging into a little bit of how.
I was just
what
about to
does this
ask.
actually look like?
I need a picture and not like an abstract picture. I want to see like what this looks like, because I know like the directives you're talking about where that looks like, but how do you even create one? Let's start with that.
So let's do something. All right, so first I'm going to go to our internal admin UI. I've got my public forums app selected, and I'm going to go down to Angular providers. And so the widget Angular providers allow you to expose directives, Angular services, or Angular factories to your different widgets. So the first thing we have to do is create a new provider and select the type. So a directive is, we're not going to be using the directives today. The directive is basically a custom element. It's kind of AngularJS's version of the Next Experience's component. Factory and service are similar enough to one another that there's not really a point in differentiating them in like 99.99% of cases.
Can you give one of the common examples of each type? Some of us have seen them, but we don't know how to associate one of them with the type that they are?
So the directive, when you use it in a widget, it would be something like this. My custom directive. You would use it in HTML. So a directive creates an HTML tag that you can use in your templates. And it
Like the
defines,
UIB modals and stuff like that? Or
yeah, kind of like that.
yeah.
And so directives allow you to apply custom elements, and they also allow you to do stuff like div my custom attribute. So, for example, in AngularJS, you may be familiar with ng repeat. And let me actually blow this up a little bit because this is probably a little small for folks. You may be familiar with ng repeat. ng repeat is a directive. It is a built-in directive in AngularJS. So there's a function behind it that is set up as a directive, and it executes the actual repeat behavior. Ng if is a directive. Ng class is a directive. And AngularJS gives you the option to create your own custom directives. So if you have used UIB accordion, for example, UIB accordion is a directive that the UI Bootstrap framework built. So that's what a directive is.
Y'all should Google that. It's amazing. It's life-changing.
A service allows you to expose a set of functions. So instead, what we're going to do, and this is what I actually want to create, and if I remember correctly, let me look at one of my other ones real quick. Let me just look at one of the existing ones. Yeah, okay. So we set it up as a function. And you'll notice that it can accept dependency injection the same way that your client script in a widget does. So Angular providers exist client side; they do not exist server side. So I'm going to create a service.
So this is a way for you to like do a lot of stuff client side, but not have it junk up your client code.
In a way, yes. But the important aspect of it is that it allows you to share. So, like a client controller is only going to apply to one specific widget. A service can be connected to multiple widgets and they can all talk to each other through it. So, let's go ahead and set one up. So, I'm going to set this one up as the public form service. And the way that I will usually do this is we're going to return a public interface. So this is the functions that can be called from this service. So in order to use this service, $HTTP, if you've ever used that, that's a service. SPUtil, that's a service. So any of these different things that you inject into your client controller, those are AngularJS services. So all we're going to do is we're going to create one of our own. So when you call $HTTP.get, it's because there is a $HTTP get object being returned like this. So this is basically the core setup. We expose a set of functions that you can call from public form service. So what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to communicate the state of different form fields. So the first thing that I'm going to create is a fields object. The fields object is going to contain the different fields that are on that we have added to our form. I want it to contain the values and some of the other relevant information about that particular field.
Is that kind of like a variable set? Talking in like service catalog terms?
Something like that. It's basically the variables. So like if you look at the glide form under the hood in Service Portal, somewhere in there you will find a fields a fields array that contains all the data about those fields and stores the values. So I'm basically going to do the same thing here and expose the fields. Now, I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to want to do this. I think what I'm going to do is expose it directly. So we'll start with this and see how it goes. Function, get fields. All this is going to do is it's going to return my fields object. And we will probably end up adding other functions to this. So first I'm going to go ahead and submit this, and then we'll actually begin doing some magical stuff. So let's go to our widgets now, because the next step we have to do is we have to attach that Angular provider to a widget. Now, I've already created our existing widget, and I don't want to waste this record or have to delete it. So what I'm going to start out with is adding the Angular provider in the related list down here.
And you can do this on a widget by widget basis.
Yep. So I could add this public form service to multiple widgets. It doesn't have to be associated with just one. And one of the things that's really cool about it is that the widgets are ephemeral. So the widgets, when the page changes, the widgets disappear. They get destroyed. And all the data contained within the widget goes away with it. But the services are long-lived. So the services, as long as you don't reload the page or click on something that does the reload or forces a reload, the data in the service will stay put, even as you navigate around the portal. So you can use this as like a caching layer as well of sorts.
I remember this is what we were talking about, storing stuff to maintain state and even storing in different payloads to help with performance on different things.
Yes. And that's not necessarily what we're doing here, but
no, that's not what we're
it's
doing here,
relevant.
but it's another purpose that we had discussed earlier.
Right.
We talk
So
about all the different tricks.
So now that I have added the Angular provider to this widget, you'll now see this dependencies drop down on the widget editor, and you'll see the public form service is now exposed on this particular widget. And I can pop it open, and now I can edit it straight from the widget editor. And this is one of the things that I absolutely love about the service portal editor here. Is just, I absolutely love this. Nowadays, I tend to prefer the VS Code extensions, but I haven't set it up for this particular project yet. So I'm just going to continue using the portal editor.
I'm so lazy. I've never set up the VS Code extension. I just use the.
Oh, it's so nice.
I know it is, and I've seen it, and all my favorite developers have sung its praises. But I'll get used to something and won't take the effort to change, which is part of the reason why I look at the new components and all that, and I'm like, cover it in caramel and get back to me. But anywho, so with the Angular provider attached to your widget from the widget record, you can now access it here in the widget editor and easily go back and forth and edit both the widget itself and the provider that is related.
Yes. So now what I can do is I can inject this public form service into my client script like so. And that exposes the public form service object. Basically, what happens is the first time this function is used, it'll call that function and it will return this object. The difference between a factory and a service is that one of them calls new on that function and the other one doesn't. So one instantiates a class and the other one just returns the plain object. I can never remember which is which, and like most of the time it doesn't matter. In most use cases, it's not going to matter which one you do. So at this point, what I can do is, let's just do kind of a proof of concept demonstration of what this enables for us. So in the NG model, I'm going to call the public form service dot get fields, and
that echoes your
dot description.
I see how that. I love that it's side by side. You can show very easily how one piece is related to the other. So going over there, you've got. So is description going to be part of the?
It should appear on this public form service object here. Now I do need to expose one other thing. And how are we going to do this? Let's do C dot this is equal to this. And you'll see why this is not necessary. This is just going to help me with demonstrating and debugging and such. So hopefully this works and does not die.
I like your assumption that you're going to have to debug.
Always. Okay. Let me put my doc inside there. There we go. Increase the size. Let's go to console, or let's start with elements. Okay. So in order for, let's check this out. So Angular element $0 dots, or hold on a second. Let me make sure I've collect the right thing. First, I want to select my widget in the elements. Then I should be able to get the scope, and that should give me access to C dot. And you see this public form service? This is why I exposed it on C, so that I can call it in console.
Oh, yeah. That's fancy.
So now I can do get fields, and you can see that the object is empty. Now let's, nope, it's not.
I need to highlight this question that Jace asked because it makes me happy.
Debirding instead.
And then the report a bug the report a bug icon would always be report a bird. And it would be like a little Twitter icon. And that would get very confusing because Twitter would probably not call itself Twitter or do the whole bird. It would change. It would fundamentally change
bugger.
So much. It would be bugger, which is funny on its own level. Anyway, that's neat because that does make it easier to debug when you could just pop it up in the console and see what you're working with there. Going back to...
Unfortunately, it did not like this. And let's see.
Travis, wake up. I don't like this.
See that description.
For the record, I don't know when this thing started where it highlights in red when you're doing something wrong, but I despise it. And whoever thought that was a good idea should be shot.
All right. So this binding here did not work. So what I want to do instead.
Jace asked if it has a problem with NG model because it's a service.
Does it have a problem? My line of thinking is that it does not like this function call in the ng model. That's my line of thinking right now. So what I'm going to do is I am going to set up an additional function that allows me to initialize a field name options. And what this is going to do is it's going to do field name to we'll just keep it simple for now, and I'll expand as needed. Just copy this. So I've created a new function and I've exposed it on the public interface. So now what I can do is I can call the public form service dot initialize field description. And the last, I'm going to go one step further and I'm going to have a return value on this. Fields, field name. And so what this will allow me to do is do c dot description is equal to initialize field and change this a bit. I know that technically does nothing, but it will indicate to me that there is in fact a value. And we'll deal with options later. Okay, we'll save that real quick. So that's what this is going to do is it's going to initialize a new field, which should add a field to that object. It should be it'll be named description. And then it's going to return that object to here. And basically what I want to do instead is c.description.value. Let's see if that works. I don't 100% know if this particular approach I'm using is going to work. I have a backup plan if it doesn't. And the backup plan will probably use directives. Okay, select that. See how it's got description on there now?
Yeah.
Okay, so what this widget has done is it has initialized a field, and that field is going to have the undefined value, and now that value should be bound to our text field. So if I type something in and redo the thing, now description has a value of test.
How does it know? Just by the fact that it's named description in both places, it ties it together?
Yeah, so basically what I've done is, so this function here is going to initialize the field. So that creates an object that has description, because see how I'm doing field name?
Yeah.
That's the
Okay,
field
because
name
you
I'm
put
passing.
description there, it passes it there. And
Right. And so what that does is that sets field to
freaking hate that. Stop it.
okay.
The red hover
Why did it do that?
thing.
So basically, the net result there is something like this. This is the object that you get out of that.
Yeah.
Then this line here returns our description object. So it returns this, which is then passed to c.description. So c.description now holds a reference to the values stored in this Angular provider.
And that connects back to the HTML, and when the HTML updates, it passes it along.
It passes it along.
Y'all, when Travis was first trying to teach me about the client script versus the server script and how to pass things along like this, I was not getting it because abstract concepts just are not my strong suit. And so he had to like take post-it notes and say, okay, if I have this and I pass it to you, you're the client script, and then you pass it along. And that is how we had to do it for me to understand this. But okay, that makes sense. You're doing the pass along thing.
Yep. And
My
all
technical
of this
terminology. I know how to do it. Don't tell me what the technical terms are for it.
and all of this may seem like a lot of legwork for not a lot of value, because like why not just use c.description? Oh, excuse me. Why not just use c.description and set it manually in here? And the reason is because now I can create a separate like a submit button. I can take this submit button, isolate it off to a different script. I can take the submit logic out of this widget, move it elsewhere, and the submit button can now access the field values separately. The other advantage this gives me is that because I can create fields by name, I can instantiate new fields on the fly. I can use instance options so that when I drag multiple text fields onto a form, I can give each one a different name in the instance options, and it'll instantiate a different field value in the service. So now I can add multiple field values, and I don't have to go into any kind of code. So let's start doing that. So the first thing I want to do is let's separate out let's separate out the three things that we have already. We've got the text area, we've got the text input, we've got a CAPTCHA, and we've got a submit button. So let's start by separating these three things out into separate widgets. So I'm going to close this real quick. And I'm going to open this one up here, and we're going to change this from Code Creative Public Form Example. Code Creative Public.
So you would do like one for a text input and one for radio buttons and one for checkbox.
Exactly.
And you would have like, okay, so with a radio button or a checkbox, you would have like multiple options. So would each option be one for a checkbox, or like for a radio, would you use instance options to create those options? See what I'm saying?
I will show you.
Do all the things.
Yeah, it's some of this stuff is going to be easier to show than to tell.
And I asked this because I know this is where you're headed, and I'm excited. And like, I know there are a couple of different ways that you could probably do this. Like in all things in ServiceNow, there's always like 10 ways to skin a cat. But
okay, and let's keep in mind that we have to mark all of these as public. In fact, did it change my last one? Because it has a tendency to do that. No, it did not. Okay. So we want the reCAPTCHA, we want the text input, and we want, what was the third one? Submit button. Separate all of these off into their own separate things. Now, remember, we have to add the Angular provider
to each one so they can all access it and access that shared state situation.
So let's save. And that was the reCAPTCHA. So the last one is the submit button.
It's so funny to me, the thought of having that button all by itself in a widget, but like I see an immense value to that.
Well, and you think about how a lot of widgets tend to grow over time, and you end up with widgets that have thousands of lines of code in them, and it's an absolute spaghetti monster, and it's difficult to reason through. And it gets extremely unwieldy. This allows you to create smaller subcomponents that are responsible for only their own behavior, and it allows you to break things up more readily. And in fact, this is what the next experience framework heavily encourages, is a component driven framework. And same with React, and same with most modern tools. AngularJS always supported it. It just offered other ways of doing it that weren't as good. And most people use those approaches rather than the more component-based structure. And so we ended up with more messes. And it was those mistakes that led to a lot of the newer frameworks. So, all right, so we've set that up. Now I want to open up my thing in the editor again, because I don't want to edit it in here.
Because, ew, who does that?
Exactly.
I know people look at me using the widget editor thinking, ew, who does that? But like there are levels of barbarianism, and I'm at least like somewhat civilized.
All right, so first, let us take the Recaptcha copy. We'll come over here. We'll put the Recaptcha into this template. Save. And this is going to be some back and forth jockeying around business. Now I will have to move my dependency over. So I will have to keep that in mind. Let's see. What else do we need to do? Some of this behavior is going to have to all right, so that's going to be on submit. Let's think about this.
So while you're thinking about that, Jace had a great comment about us using. We're talking about using about the benefit of this from a design standpoint, and the configuration it gives us, and the fine-tuned nature of it, because it's reusable and configurable and all that. And he made a comment about the sooner we all adopt more semantic HTML, the sooner our forms will be more accessible. And I think that's a really valid point. I'm going to post an article in the chat that I just found, just a quick overview of the more semantic HTML elements. And these are just elements instead of like a more generic div. There are things like header, article, footer, stuff like that that you probably have seen before. But the more we use those, the more it's easier for people with screen readers to tell what they're interacting with.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I see what you're saying, Jace, the use of the label element beside the field, like Travis is doing here in the HTML on lines 7 and 8, is one of the best ways that you can ensure that accessibility there.
Okay, copy that. Submit button. Let's move some of the submit button stuff over. Okay, then I can grab this submit function and move
This is
that over
what
to
you're
the
going to
submit
move
button.
to the submit button widget.
Yep.
So it's all by itself, and you'll have all these nice little widgets, but it's not like it's an unwieldy amount, because really, how many different types of inputs are you going to have? Excuse me. And because we're using the page designer to set these forms up, say if you want to put a background color or something behind the form, you would do that on the column level, correct? And then within that, you can use nested columns and rows to create input fields that are half width or full width or
Right.
whatever. How will that affect the tabbing among the fields?
Tabbing is driven by tab index. which is driven by the HTML order. So the short answer is, depending on how you set up your containers and the order in which you drop your fields is the order in which tab index will fire. Now, one of the things that I can do is I can expose tab index as a instance option so that you could manually override it. And that is a good point.
You know what that would solve. So this is something I had to teach my designers about when they came in to do design work for Service Portal, because as we all know, Service Portal has its own little special muffin tendencies. But on forms, whether your service catalog or the public forms that I've seen, when you put two fields 50% width side by side, because only options we have are full width or two 50% fields next to each other. If you're using like service catalog or what have you, is if you put two side by side and then put two side by side under it, it doesn't go tab left to right and then down left to right. It goes tab down, 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 and then goes to the top of the next column down, 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 which is really terrible experience. It's really confusing. So just pro tip, when you're designing those forms for service catalog items that are going to be viewed in the portal, I will make sure that if I'm putting two side by side, the one underneath is full width, just to avoid that weird behavior. And sometimes the forms are like, you're not going to have a set of two columns of 50% width. So sometimes it looks like you'll have like one field all stretched out, and maybe you wouldn't normally do that. But what it does is it ensures that tabbing behavior is a little more intuitive, because it's not just people that use screen readers that are going to tab in between their fields.
All right.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I had to pause working on things real quick because this is important. So right now I'm in the submit button. Submit button has access to the public form service, but there's no longer a C.dot description. Like, we've pulled this out of the widget it was originally in, and C.dot description does not exist anymore.
So what do we need to make that look like?
So what we need to make this look like now, and of course this is going to change as we make things more generic. Right now we're going to keep it more specific, and we'll make it more generic over time. But what we need instead is we need to replace this with the public form service dot get fields dot description dot value. So now we're going to get the same value, but we're getting it through our Angular provider. We're getting it through our service. So now we have two widgets that can share data with each other and can talk to each other directly without having to fire events, without having to store separate state, without having to keep each other in sync. The service keeps them in sync. They share. So now that that submit button is updated. And if we go back here, so we now have submit. We're initializing that field. Let's see, is there anything in the server script? No, there's nothing in the server script. So I should be able to get rid of the submit button stuff. So that's no longer needed in here. I should be able to get rid of that. I should be able, did I already get rid of the Recaptcha? I guess I already got rid of Recaptcha. Okay, we'll save that. All right, and then the last thing I should need to do, if I open this up, if you remember correctly, we put this dependency on the text input. And that's bad. We don't want that on the text input widget anymore. We want it on the Code Creative Public Google Recaptcha. That's the Google Recaptcha library that actually makes the Google Recaptcha work. All right, so now we have three widgets. Now, of course, the problem is only one of them's on the page. So
we're going to go to our handy dandy page designer.
We're going to go to our handy dandy page designer. We're going to reload it because that's broken. There we go.
I want you to let me in while you're doing this and setting up these widgets, so I can just like go in and do spacing, and then when you refresh it, it'll be like, ta-da, spacing.
All right, we will have to do one other thing on that widget, because I think I've still got, yeah, let's get rid of that heading. Oh, I hate it when that happens.
And you would
See,
have the heading as its own widget as well, wouldn't you?
yep.
Which is, to me, one of the best practices. It's one as a service portal developer, it is one of the best things you can do for yourself is just have that handy dandy widget that you can set through instance options to H1, H2, H3. This is something I should put on share drive because I make this all the time. And then set like a few different stylistic options or whatever on it and just like plop it on the page. When instance option, put your text in and you're done,
Feedback form.
or you could use the HTML thing and be lazy.
Absolutely. All right. And then we need to add our Recaptcha.
My widget
And
allows you to
then-
easily add like the underlines and other kinds of elements. But
And then we
anywho.
need to add our submit button. So now we have separate widgets. They should now all be on the page. And now we get to watch it not work. Separate widgets. I'm not a robot. Submit.
Do it.
And we've got a data 200. Oh, I think that might have actually worked.
Yeah, the thing said status okay, and I was like, oh, it worked.
Public feedbacks.
This is the fun part of Code Creative Live or any
Oh my
kind
God.
of any kind of live coding is you get to see the joy on the developers' faces when they actually do it and it works right the first time.
It worked the first time. Testing
Congratulations,
separate widgets.
sir. This is why you are the code creative.
No, that's not happening. No,
That's what's going to happen.
no,
People are going to catch on. They're going to start. Oh, it's the code creative.
no. That's no, that's not happening.
I can't be it.
Nope.
Nope.
Refuse.
But it's so fetch. Not a thing.
Stop trying to make fetch a thing. That I don't know what to do now. That worked first time. I was expecting a lot more debugging and troubleshooting. I'm like so thrilled with that. Okay, so we can still take. There's still more we can do. We're not done yet. Okay. So let's go back to our widgets.
All about the widgets. I need to get a shirt made. It's all about the widgets. Widgets, components. Oh, made in Taiwan. Sorry, pop culture reference.
So now we need to start making this more generic because I don't want a description field. I want an input field. So we need instance options. We need to be able to modify this stuff.
That's easy.
So
call this one label.
Label.
Now, do you need instance options to hook these up to a field on the back end?
Again?
Are you going to need instance options to, like when you plop these individual widgets on the back end and it gets submitted, it is going to be submitted and plopped onto a table in the back end that has fields. So is the instance options where we connect this to a certain field on a certain table to make it line up? Or how is that? Or are we not there yet?
A, we're not there yet. B, probably not in instance options. On one hand, you could do it in instance options.
I do everything in instance options.
And there's certainly nothing wrong with that in this particular case. I think I want it to be more flexible, so I am probably going to provide like a table of scripts where you can like script where you want those fields to go.
We're going to do that because I want to see that.
So let's see.
And Jace wants to know where the tab order is set. Because I think he's excited and impatient like me. I will be your voice, Jace. Always good to put those hints in so people know what your instance options are. This is how you help your clients achieve full mobility and not need you. the goal is to help them be successful, and this helps them understand what your instance options do.
Presentation.
Are you really anal about like categorizing your instance options and stuff, or do you just kind of leave it?
Yes, I love categorizing things. Internal name, string, used
I gotta get my fidget toy out. I'm excited, and it's making my attention go all over the place, like it doesn't any other night that we're doing this, but it's bad.
behavior.
So you did the label, and what was this other one that you did?
Internal name. And I will go ahead and add, let's see. Let me make sure I'm right on this. The element should be focusable.
This is called catering to your audience right here, folks.
It is. I'm doing not reachable means that the element should be focusable, sequential. A positive value means should be focusable. Okay, so the tab index order.
Jace mentioned custom poppets in the comments, so I wanted to show him my poppet. Oh, are we talking about these kind of poppets? I think he's talking about this kind of poppet because it's a fidget toy. It's a poppet, but it's a ball. This is awesome because this option right here will mean that you can doubly ensure that brain words that tab order is set up like in an intuitive way. My design team, we've got to where we're trying to give more guidance to the dev teams because they'll put together the form, the service catalog item, the variables. They'll just set it up, and actually have read an entire book because I'm a nerd on form design. Here, I'll show it to y'all. Forms at Work, great read, fascinating if you're a total nerd. And it talked about like the tab order and like laying out form fields and what goes into making it a more intuitive conversation between you and your user and how you get that information. And so we'll provide guidance on a lot of these service catalog items, especially the longer ones, for how to lay these fields out properly. And this right here will help ensure that that's an intuitive experience.
All right, so this description is no longer description. Now we're changing it to c.options.internal name. So now we can add multiple inputs using different names, and all of those values will be accessible. c.field. So that'll make that more generic. And then I actually don't want that to be Textarea. I want this to be input. Input is self-closing.
Are you sure?
Yes. It is one of the only self-closing tags. There's a very short list of self-closing tags, and if you put self-closing tags on things that are not self-closing, Tokyo really hates it.
That's exactly why I was asking. Not because I didn't trust you, because I know that to be true, but because of other circumstances where we have run into widgets that, or rather you, I can't say I did this myself, but ran into widgets that spontaneously combusted on Tokyo because of this issue.
NG attribute. Okay.
Stack Overflow.
So I'm going to use NG attribute tab index. So certain properties you don't want to. When this template is first rendered, it will be rendered with the junk like this. And some values don't like that. Like if you set certain attributes to an invalid value, like it won't accept the new value that you give it. And so for those type, ng href is an example of one that bad things can happen if you don't do it right. So you can do ng attribute in front of it, and basically what this says is set this attribute to that value. And that's going to be c.options.tab index. I can't remember if I did it as internal name. It's underscore tab underscore index. All right, so that should give me tab index. Okay. You know what? I'm going back to Textarea. And I'm just going to rename this widget to Textarea because description doesn't make sense as a standard input. That bothers me. Well, I didn't ask you to help me, editor. Okay. All right, so now I have to open this page in Page Designer. Or actually, technically, I need to reload this because I should be able to do the instance options from here. Let's give some better defaults. That'll work. All right, reload. All right, so now we've got a field with the field label, and we're going to do instance options. And let's set this guy to description. Let's set the field name to description and tab index to 0.
And did you explain earlier why you set it to 0?
0 makes it tabbable. And basically the larger the tab index value, the later that particular field is reached. So for example, let's say, for example, I were to change this tab index to 5. The submit button should be 0. So if I tab,
Yeah, it went to the submit button first, I think. Oh, you're up there on your browser window.
let's reload. No, well, reloading's not going to work. Here, let's set it to instance options. Let's set it to 5. We'll set it back to 0 later. Reload.
I love how you trudge through the extra directions when I ask questions just to make sure it's clear. Yeah, it skipped over description.
I don't think it skipped over it. I think it did it first.
Oh.
Yeah, it did it first.
Oh, okay. Missed it.
Is it larger as first? It's supposed to be the other way around. Maybe it's because I haven't set tab index on the other ones. So like if I change the tab index on this one, let's see what happens. Tab index equal to 3. And on the submit button, we'll do tab index equal to 1.
Yeah, Jace asked if there was a tab index on the submit button. Tab through all your browser stuff.
Now, It's definitely affected it, that's for sure. Like, I don't know. We'll have to do some more testing on that one because I'm not sure.
I made a note. We can come back to that one too, because I think that's a cool feature to, especially for the forums to have in mind.
Well, I mean, the other thing that you have to keep in mind, and I'm going to yank the tab index out for now, and we can revisit that one later. I'm going to yank tab index out of it.
It's a start.
One thing you have to keep in mind is that by default, it is going to tab in order of appearance. So you can see how it started up here. Oh, that's what happened. So you can see as I tab through, it's going in order. Then it hits here. Then it goes down to the next one. Then it goes down to the next. So it tabs in a sensible order. So if you want it to tab across, then you structure your containers to make it tab across. If you want it to tab down, then you structure your containers to tab down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So let's see. All right, so now if I do the inspect element again, and I'm going to select the widgety. I got the wrong widgety. I need this widgety.
I like that we're in the point of the evening where we call them widgeties. Is widgety an adjective or a noun?
So to test this out, there we go. So it's still capturing the value. And keep in mind that we've taken the hard coding out. So like that value is no longer hard coded to that particular name. Now, on the other hand, our submit button is currently still hard coded. So we will need to update that eventually, but I don't want to have to mess with the backend code right now. So I'm going to let that one lie.
Jay said he couldn't find the LinkedIn stream, that that and YouTube are out of sync. So we may have to go look at that and figure that out later.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, we'll have to take a look at that.
Anywho.
Oh, so LinkedIn stream is running a little behind, I guess. Yeah, I don't know how good the LinkedIn streaming one is.
Because your comments, Jace, have been right in step with us. We're used to seeing everybody on like a 6-second delay, and you've been much more in line with us this time, which has been really interesting.
All right.
It's more live.
And Genny mentioned, don't forget to add the Araya attributes for screen readers and such. So we will make sure to go back. I'm not going to add those right now, but we are going to go back and make sure to add the different accessibility attributes to each of our widgets.
That's a conversation all on its own. Not just and there's two different sides to it. There's the design side of accessibility and making sure you have it right there, and then coding for accessibility is a whole nother ball game. And the suggestions that Jason and I have been talking about and what Guinea just added, those have all been really good parts of the conversation on accessibility.
So I just want to demonstrate.
I always thought it was pronounced Aria, though.
I mean, I honestly don't know. I've only ever read it. I've rarely ever heard other people say it, so I have no idea.
There's a musical term called aria, and And I've heard it as a name for a child, and every time that's how it's been pronounced. So
I'm going to create another one here called comments to
you do that.
demonstrate.
I'm going to look this up.
This is just going to demonstrate that we can use the same widget multiple times on the form and that it will still use our we don't speak English, we speak code.
That's the truth.
All
When
right,
I
so then we're going
emote
to
in
inspect.
like Slack or whatever, I do it in like HTML tags.
This is just going to demonstrate that. There you go. So you can see that we've got both comments and description on our payload.
Nice.
And so that's coming again from our public form service. So now we can add multiple text areas to this form or any other form, and it will still work. Now, I do want to highlight
Your lack of padding.
well, yes, there is a lack of padding.
I'm sorry. I have to troll you at least some.
Now, there is one particular issue here that we will end up running into and we will have to deal with, and that is that if I were to navigate away from this form and come back to it, it would hold on to all of these values. Like these values wouldn't disappear. So we will have to introduce something to reset that Angular service.
Would that hold over if like I filled out the comment form from my computer and you filled it out from another computer in
No.
another house, or is that just like on a per device basis?
It is on a per browser basis, not even a per device. So like if you open this up in two different browsers on the
It
same
will.
machine,
Okay.
the browser is what stores it. So basically, because AngularJS is a single page application, when you are navigating from one page to another, it's not actually doing a full page refresh most of the time, depending on how the developer implemented the link. If it's done properly, it's not reloading a completely new page every time. It's reloading fragments of a page, and so your Angular providers get loaded once. Once per full page refresh, they will get loaded in as soon as you use them. So like the this public form service will not get loaded until you navigate to this specific page. But once you load it, that service gets loaded into AngularJS and it gets stored there. And it will hold all of its values no matter what page you navigate to. So if you were to navigate to a different page using these menus and then navigate back to this page, it would store those values. Now, if I navigate back using browser URL, that induces a full page refresh and everything that is stored client side gets washed out. So it gets cleared out and those values are no longer stored. So when it stores and when it doesn't is very nuanced, and it depends on how the developers implemented specific links. There are ways of doing the links that it will cause a full page refresh, and there are ways of doing it that will cause it to load page fragments. And the way that they do it will determine whether or not the data gets cached or not and loaded from that cache. And basically, when I say cached, what's happening is it's the same way as if I were to say var a equals something. And now in other scripts, I can call a and, oh, look, the value's cached. It's something.
It's the
It's
reason
just
why if you visit a site repeatedly and you're allowing caching, the images will display much quicker on subsequent visits, isn't
no,
it?
no.
That's not caching? But that's why I empty my cache.
Yes, images are cached, but that's what I'm pointing out is that when I'm talking about caching in this sense, I'm talking about it very loosely. This is not the browser cache. This is not the server cache. This is, it would be more
accurate. Not cache money.
It would be more accurate to describe it as your current JavaScript execution context. So, currently A is something, okay? And I can do this as many times as I want. And I can call A from other scripts, and it still holds that value. As soon as I reload this page, alert, A doesn't exist anymore. I have to set A again.
Hey, Trav.
Yeah.
Is this like A doesn't exist anymore? Is this kind of like how reality isn't real?
Don't get me started. That's not what it means.
We'll have to go into that later. That could be like a cozy coding happy hour like later, which I'm officially calling it now. That's my name
but
for it.
It's not happy hour if we don't have drinks.
That's why it's cozy coding happy hour, because we have like nice snacks and things like that. But anywho, let me bring you back after I tangented you.
But yeah, so basically your when I say cache, what I really mean is the current JavaScript execution context. As long as you stay on this page, the A will still be there. Mm-hmm. And basically in AngularJS, and I don't 100% know if this is going to work or not. I think it will. See how A still exists?
Even on a different page, because even on a different same browser session.
No, not because it's the same browser session, because it's the same page.
I cannot get this right.
AngularJS is a single page application. So each time I click on a different page, it's not a different page. It's still the same page. It's just loaded stuff in the background and replaced HTML on the same page.
So the entire portal is really one page according to the AngularJS. And so yeah, I wasn't wrong with browser session if it's like on the same site.
The problem is that if I reload, okay, if I hit refresh,
even if you are on the...
This is the same browser session.
Uh-huh.
I am still using the same session. But A doesn't exist anymore. And that's
okay,
why,
I get it.
That's why I say you really can't use the term session, because session is a different concept.
Good to differentiate. So it's as long as you're browsing within the same site, because even though you're looking at multiple pages in the traditional web development context, according to AngularJS, it's all one page. So as long as you stay on the same AngularJS page, it'll all stay the same.
The HTML tag doesn't change. This is this page here, and this page here, and this page here are all using the same HTML tag. That HTML tag does not get reloaded from a different page. So it is the same exact HTML page. You're just changing the data. You're just doing a document.add element, document.remove element. You're just updating the tags on the existing page. That's what AngularJS does in the background. So if I can get back to my page.
I wanted to make sure we were clear on what would keep the element versus the information versus not.
Let me try something real quick, because I think if I navigate and browser back, I think AngularJS intercepts browser back. It does not. It did a full page refresh. If it did not do a full page refresh on browser back, what would have happened is you would have still seen test in the form fields.
So it isn't necessarily about staying on the same page, AngularJS page?
If you call $location.search to navigate the page, that hooks into AngularJS, into the AngularJS side of the navigation framework. That will keep you on the exact same page. It is a different view, but it is the same page.
But hitting
If you
browser back
use
takes you back to a different version of the page, so a different AngularJS page.
browser back is a browser action, and so the browser is going to reload the previous page. And the easiest way to think of the easiest way to view this is through this here. Okay, there are docs and there are XHRs, which is basically XHRs is JavaScript asking the server for more data. Docs are full URL refreshes. So if I load this up, you will see here's a doc, here's a doc, here's a doc. So we've loaded a couple docs. This is the one we're looking at right now. If I navigate to the catalog page, did you see a doc pop up?
No.
No new doc.
It's
No
the
new
same
doc was loaded. What was loaded was an XHR. So if I click on, if I clear everything out, okay, and I click on this guy, you see how there were XHRs that loaded? These are response. These are these are JSON payloads, okay, not HTML pages. If I look at docs, there was no doc. Docs are HTML. XHRs are different payloads, usually JSON when you're talking about Service Portal.
Guinea makes the comment, if you looked at the URL, if the text changes before the question mark, which I believe is center, yeah, question mark ID there. So basically, if the portal URL changes, then you did a page change. If not, you're on the same page. So each portal is a complete and total page on its own.
We'll see. And if I turn around and I do,
what if I looked at the same, like this, the ticket page in a CSM portal versus the SP?
Well, so watch this here. So you've got SP, and it's going to have the same SP, and I'm going to ID equals feedback. See how I got a doc? I got a new doc. It was a full page reload. But if I navigate here, it still keeps SP, but it changed the ID, no new doc. There are specific activities that will trigger a complete full page refresh. It will trigger requesting a new doc. So for example, let's say, let me click through to here real quick. Let me do an inspect element on this guy. So right now, you see how it's doing question mark ID equals SC home? It is staying on the same Service Portal page. It is only changing the search criteria, and this is what Genny was talking about. It's only changing the search criteria for that URL. So AngularJS will intercept it and keep it on the same page. If I were to change that to CSP, for example, now it's going to do a full page reload.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd kind of ascertained that looking at the different docs that had popped up. Okay.
Well, it may not have in this case.
Do you?
Oh, it kept it on SP. That's why. It kept it on SP for some reason.
You have CSM loaded on your?
I don't remember.
That might also have something to do with it.
But so
anyway,
bottom line, there are certain things that trigger a full page refresh, and there are certain things that keep you on the same page. If it stays on the same page, the Angular service will keep the data. No matter how many pages you navigate through, as long as the same HTML page stays up. As long as you're in the same JavaScript context, the Angular service will still hold that data. If you change the HTML page, then the Angular service will lose that data. So that is an edge case that. Good night, Gabby. Kenny was saying I have to do a /CSM. Oh yeah, okay. I forgot the slash in the URL. But yeah, so basically the overall point I was trying to make is that we are going to have to handle certain edge cases with the Angular service in order to reset the data. For example, when we load up a new form. When we load up a new form, we want to clear out the original data. For now, because we're just about at 10 o'clock, I'm going to work towards wrapping this up. Eventually, what we want to do is we want to add additional field types. We want to support accessibility. We will also want to support scripting some criteria for handling, making fields read-only, making fields required. We'll want to handle some logic to basically we're going to want to support some of the things that Service Catalog supports. I don't want to leave people, completely absent without those things. I want to provide some of the basics. And, then we will want to move to server side where we open up the ability to handle these public submissions. Doing it this way, and we discussed in one of the earlier episodes whether or not just to use Service Catalog and expose Service Catalog to public, and that can be done. I may provide a solution for that as well eventually. But what I don't like about that is that you have to make a lot of different endpoints public. And personally, I am not comfortable with that being the main solution. It makes me very uncomfortable exposing your internal and external forms all in the same way. Basically, you have to make all of your internal endpoints public for Service Catalog. So that means if you come under some sort of attack, you can't just disable the public forms, but leave your internal forms operational. You would have to disable all of it. By separating your Service Catalog from your public forms, you can have a more nuanced approach to what you turn off. You can provide a kill switch for your public forms, leave your internal forms operational, and you can get a little more nuanced in how you handle an attack in progress.
Jace asked if we were done with security.
No, we're not done with security. And part of the security we haven't addressed yet is kind of the IP addresses and being able to set that up, and also the kill switches. We kind of have the ability to kill switch through the single REST endpoint, but what I want to do is expand on what that REST endpoint can do so that users don't have to create multiple REST endpoints. They can just operate off of one public REST endpoint that can do multiple things for them. That way there's one kill switch to eliminate all the threat. Beyond that, the other thing I wanted to look at from a security standpoint was with the IP tracking, I wanted to see if we could do some more targeted rate limiting, where we turn around and say, rate limiting based off of a specific IP, which IPs can be spoofed, so it's not bulletproof. But again, for the people that aren't spoofing their IP addresses, for like the script kiddies that are just, bombarding you from a single endpoint, it is a layer of protection against specific attacks that's fairly easy to implement if you can get a hold of an IP address. So, I mean, there are things that we can look at in that. I do still want to expand on that, but I just wanted to do some fun stuff for a little bit in terms of being able to demonstrate that we're not building just a static form and saying, here you go, go into the code and figure this out. No, the plan here is to build something where you can drag and drop in the service portal interface, build your own form how you want using these different components. Because as you can see here, you can drag and drop multiple text areas now using different names. And when we add the server side component to this, you'll see how we can map different names to the different field names internally, similar to a record producer. So we're building kind of a service catalog light for the public forms. And again, that in and of itself is part of the security, because that way we don't have to expose service catalog to public. We can keep our service catalog internal and still build up external forms. And interestingly enough, what's really cool is that technically you could order service catalog items through this if you wanted to. I don't know that I'll actually demonstrate that because there are other nuances there. And then Genny says, if you set up your cores, you can set it so only data sent from form localhost is applicable. Only data sent from form localhost is applicable. I'll have to talk to you more about that one, Genny, to understand what you're thinking on that one. CORS rules do tend to be fairly important, though. Someone should make a list of things to check as you do them. Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of different ideas for things that we're going to be implementing on all this. We probably should create a checklist. What I should do is I should create a Git repository and publish this application to the Git repository so that I can keep track through stories, the things that need to be implemented, so that we can check those things off as we go. And also that will help make sure that my application is backed up to a Git repository in case I lose my my PDI for any reason.
You should do that.
So I will probably look at doing that. But for tonight, what we've demonstrated here is that we can create that we can separate different widgets and have them communicate using a single Angular service, which to me is one of the most underutilized capabilities in service portal widgets. So we can separate those out. We can do separate widgets, locate the specific functionality in that widget, and allow those widgets to communicate through a service. Specifically, what this has enabled for our public form is we can basically use Service Portal's native drag and drop interface as a form builder for our public forms. So I could create multiple public pages, multiple public forms, and they could all submit through our, through the rest of our public form framework to create these different records in the back end. Eventually, we will expand what records they can create because, let's be honest, not every customer is going to want to create my special muffin little public feedback records. Some of them are going to want to create cases. Some of them are going to want to create other things. And I'm going to provide a safe mechanism that I recommend for doing it. And then I will also create a slightly less safe version where they can script whatever they want. So they can create cases directly if they so desire.
Cannot use it unless you sign like a disclaimer.
What I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and set it up for a best practices out of box. If you start using it, this is going to be at least the best that Travis Tulson knows how to do. And if other people want to suggest security ideas to make it better, great. But initially, it'll just be, whatever we come up with here. But it's going to have all of the best security ideas that I have for securing these forms built in. But I am going to offer capabilities for people to throttle that back should they choose to do so. But it will have to be their decision to throttle it back. But what I will do is offer the ability to throttle it back piecemeal. So instead of going in and cloning and rewriting the entire code base, you'll have little sandboxes where you can write your own code here, and you'll still have the Google Recaptcha protections without having to write that yourself. And you can slowly step back until your heart's content. But that's the idea. That is what we have done tonight, and that's kind of where we're going with this. But hopefully this has demonstrated that, people will be able to really use this framework to build a lot of different public forums. Like, you won't be limited to just, it won't be like it won't be like ServiceNow's user self-registration, where like if you want to change anything about it, you have to go in code. The idea here is like a service catalog for public submissions.
Something a little easier for a client to like change out the forms on there for a public thing.
Yes. The idea is that any of the ServiceNow implementers out there, any of the ServiceNow partners sending their folks in to do a public form implementation. If you are brand new to ServiceNow, this is your first service portal project, you know nothing about Recaptcha, you know nothing about any of these security features, this will provide you a framework where you can go in, drag and drop, not have to worry about complicated code, build what you need, and have it done in a secure way, baseline out of box. That's the idea here. I want to try to help make this aspect of the ServiceNow platform as secure as it can be for the implementers that are running around out there just trying to get stuff done. Because, I mean, I can't hold it against implementers when I come across the form that I'm like, well, this is horribly unsecure, and this instance could potentially go down. Folks are doing the best they can in the time they're given, on the projects they're given, with the skills they have at that moment in time.
And with the testing,
yep.
testing users that they have on hand and everything, there's a lot of things that lead to the product you end up getting implementation to implementation.
And my hope is that this will offer a freely available framework that lowers the barrier of entry to a well-done, secure public form implementation that's still flexible to the implementer's needs. I feel like tonight with the Textarea field that we've created and these different fields that we've created, I feel like we've got a really good start on setting this up, and we've got a really good base here.
Oh yeah.
And we'll be able to continue to build on this in future episodes. And Kenny says that he will be happy to pen test the forums, and I will gladly take you up on that, because it's terrible to pen test your own stuff. All right. Well, I think that wraps us up for tonight. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Always enjoy it, and hope to see you next time.
All right. Have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.